The London Reckoning. A Frank Murray Investigation. Season 3, Episode 8. London in December has a quality that no other city quite manages. A specific gray that isn't merely the absence of sun, but a positive condition, a deliberate atmospheric choice. The sky committing fully to the proposition that light is optional and the world can get on perfectly well without it. The Thames goes the color of old pewter. The plane trees along the embankment stand stripped and architectural against the low clouds. The city closes itself into coats and umbrellas, and the particular stoic containment of a population that has decided, over several centuries of practice, that weather is not something you argue with. We landed at Heathrow on a Wednesday morning, and by the time we cleared the M4 into the city proper, I'd been awake for 22 hours and had the particular tunnel vision clarity of the second wind, the kind that feels like focus, and is actually the first stage of collapse. Sarah was reading. She'd slept 4 hours on connection to Frankfurt and woken up with the focused calm of someone who had processed the last 6 months and arrived at London already knowing what she thought about it. Miles sent the full briefing, she said, without looking up from her phone. All 63 pages. I know, I said. I read 47 of them before Zurich. The last 16 are the most important ones, she said. Of course they are, I said. The taxi moved through the gray morning into Kensington, past the Georgian terraces and the plane trees, and a particular density of a city that had been built and built again over 1,000 years without ever quite starting over, so that every street carried its own archaeology. Victorian beneath Georgian, beneath medieval, beneath Roman, all of it stacked and coexisting in the way that very old cities coexist with their own pasts. 7 countries, 8 months, 135 people who've been used as research subjects by a man who believed the usual rules of human dignity didn't apply to what he was building. London was the last stop before the end. I needed to be awake for it. Before I go any further, if you followed Frank and Sarah across 7 countries and you're still here, thank you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. You being here is what makes this worth doing. And now, back to London where the last door is waiting. Miles had called it the nervous system. In Seoul, we'd found a node. In Tokyo, another. Singapore, Bangkok, Manila, New Delhi, each one a piece of the same architecture, each one connected to the others through layers of shell companies and encrypted communications, and the careful geography of Pemberton's planning. The research happened in the facilities. The money moved through Zurich. But the operational coordination, the day-to-day management of the network, the personnel placements, the supply chains, the communications between facility directors, and the oversight layer above them, that always pointed, when Miles pulled hard enough on the threads, back toward London, not toward Pemberton himself. He didn't operate the network personally. He provided strategic direction and signed off on research authorizations and kept his hands at a specific remove from the operational mechanics. That remove was deliberate. It was designed to create plausible deniability at the level of direct management. Between Pemberton and the facility directors, there had always been an intermediary layer, someone who translated his instructions into operational reality, someone who managed the personnel, resolved the complications, kept the network running when individual nodes went dark. Miles had been chasing the identity of that person for 3 months. He'd gotten a partial name in Zurich. Fragments in communications recovered from the Meridian Helvetica servers, cross-referenced against the operational correspondence from New Delhi and Manila. A woman, British national, professional background in international corporate consulting, an address in Belgravia. In the last 16 pages of Miles's briefing document, he'd filled in the rest. The hotel was in Pimlico, near the river, a quiet Georgian building that had been converting itself into accommodation with varying levels of commitment for about 100 years, and had settled on a kind of dignified practicality that suited us perfectly. We checked in. I slept 4 hours. Sarah had a call with Torres. When I woke up, she had a printed summary on the desk and 2 cups of tea that had gone cold while she'd been on the phone. Torres sends his best, she said, and a reminder that we have no legal authority in the United Kingdom, and that if we were to do anything that required the involvement of Metropolitan Police without prior coordination, he would describe it as a significant problem. That's a more specific kind of reminder than he usually sends. I said, "He's been in contact with the National Crime Agency," Sarah said. "He's been in contact with them for 3 weeks, actually. He's been building this in parallel with everything we were doing in Zurich, and before that." She picked up the summary. "The NCA contact is a woman named Detective Chief Superintendent Vivian Okafor. She runs the International Corruption Unit. Torres says she's been aware of Pemberton's network for 2 years, specifically the London dimension, but has been unable to act without sufficient predicate under UK law. And the documentation we brought from Zurich and New Delhi and everywhere else is the predicate," I said. "Torres's word was transformative," Sarah said. "For Torres, that's a significant escalation in vocabulary." I looked at the printed summary. At the top, in Miles's formatting, was a name: Diana Ashworth, 53 years old, British, Cambridge educated, 22 years building a consultancy that placed senior executives at pharmaceutical and biotech firms across Europe and Asia, an impeccable professional record, multiple industry awards, a profile in a leading business publication 3 years ago describing her as one of the most influential figures in European life sciences talent management you've never heard of. That was the most important part of the description. Never heard of. Pemberton had chosen her precisely because she was the kind of person whose influence was structural rather than visible. She placed people. She built relationships. She facilitated connections between institutions and individuals in ways that left no fingerprints on the outcome, only the invisible architecture of who ended up where and who owed what to whom. She placed Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka's business development contact in Tokyo, Sarah said. The person who initially introduced Tanaka to the Meridian Pacific structure. She placed the intake coordinator in Manila, who recruited the subjects. She placed a supply chain manager who procured the equipment for the New Delhi sublevels. She paused. Miles found her fingerprints in 5 of the 6 facilities we've closed. She's been Pemberton's placement network, his human infrastructure. Where is she now? I said. Belgravia, Sarah said. Same address Miles identified in Zurich. She's been in London for the past month. She didn't run when Allenbach was arrested. Why not? I said. Sarah set down the summary. Miles's theory, and Torres agrees, is that she believes she's insulated. The consultancy work is all structurally legitimate. Executive placement is legal. She's never been on a corporate filing. Her name appears nowhere in any of the documentation from the facilities. The connection to Pemberton runs entirely through encrypted communications and financial transfers that Allenbach managed on her behalf through Meridian Helvetica. But those accounts are frozen, I said. Yes, Sarah said. And Miles has spent 3 weeks finding every transfer that ran through them that touched Ashworth's consultancy accounts. She paused. The NCA has those records now. They have the documentary basis for arrest. What they need is the communications evidence from facility servers, the encrypted messages that were sent from Ashworth's devices to facility directors. That evidence is spread across the server data from Seoul, Manila, New Delhi, and Hong Kong, which Miles has, I said, which Miles has been compiling into a single package to the NCA for 48 hours. Sarah said. He sent the final version to Torres and Okafor this morning. I sat with this. So the NCA can move without us, I said. The NCA can move without us, Sarah confirmed. Okafor has an arrest warrant in preparation. Torres thinks it executes within 24 to 48 hours. She paused. But Okafor wants to meet with us first. She wants to understand the full operational picture, the things that aren't in documents, the judgment calls, the pattern. She looked at me, and there's something else. There's always something else. I said, the Belgravia address. Sarah said, Ashworth's office. Miles has confirmed she's been there every day this week. But in the past 6 hours, her encrypted communications traffic, the same cellular pattern Miles has been monitoring, has increased significantly. She's been reaching out to people, multiple contacts in multiple countries. She knows, I said. Something told her, Sarah said, or someone. We don't know if it's a specifically or if it's the broader pattern of the network unraveling. But the communication spike started 4 hours ago. I looked at the cold tea. 24 to 48 hours. Maybe 24 hours too many. That's why Okafor wants to meet today, Sarah said. Now, actually, she's waiting. Detective Chief Superintendent Vivian Okafor met us at the offices of the National Crime Agency on Citadel Place in Pimlico, which was, it turned out, approximately 4 minutes from our hotel, which was either a coincidence or the kind of thing Torres arranged without mentioning. She was in her early 50s, tall, with the particular bearing of a person who had spent a career in rooms where authority needed to be established quickly and had learned to do it with economy rather than volume. She wore a dark suit and the expression of someone who had reviewed an enormous amount of documentation in a short time and was now in the process of calibrating it against the actual people in front of her. Murray, she said to me, then with a slightly different quality of assessment, Murray, to Sarah. Then, sit down. I have a lot of questions and a limited window. We sat. Her conference room looked out over the Thames, a gray stretch of river under a gray sky, the Albert Bridge visible upstream in the winter light. I've read everything Miles Danforth sent, she said. I've read everything Torres's office sent before that. I've read the Tanaka documentation, the New Delhi server reconstruction, the Allenbach statements, and the financial forensics from Bachman's office in Zurich. She paused. What I haven't read is what happened in the rooms, the judgment calls, the moments where the documentation doesn't capture what you actually saw. What specifically do you need? Sarah said, Ashworth. Okafor said, she's going to be arrested in the next 24 hours. When she's arrested, she's going to have a legal team that is very expensive and very prepared, and they're going to build a defense around the proposition that everything she did was legitimate executive placement work, and that she had no operational knowledge of what the people she placed were doing once they were placed. She looked at both of us. What I need to know is, does the pattern support that defense, or does it destroy it? I thought about Hiroshi Tanaka in the Fujisawa coffee shop, the 11 months of personal records he'd kept as insurance, Dr. Mehta in New Delhi, the 40 minutes she'd spent in the basement, deciding what the rest of her life should look like, the researcher in the Seoul Annex who'd looked at Dr. Park with the specific expression of someone who knew and had chosen to keep knowing. The people Ashworth placed, I said, didn't stumble into Chrysalis. They were selected for it. The pattern we found across 5 facilities is that the individuals in key operational roles, intake coordinators, supply chain managers, communications handlers, had specific professional profiles that matched what Chrysalis needed at each site. That's not a coincidence of executive placement. That's tailored recruitment for specific functions within a covert operation. Can you document that? Okafor asked. Miles can, Sarah said. The job specifications and the placement contracts versus the actual roles those individuals performed inside the facilities. There's a documented gap in every case. The official role doesn't describe what the person actually did. Someone designed both the official cover and the actual function. That someone had to know both what the cover needed to say and what the function actually was. Okafor wrote something. Her handwriting was precise and small. The communication spike, I said. Started 4 hours ago, you said. 4 hours and 30 minutes ago now. Okafor said. Miles's monitoring flagged it. We've been watching the pattern. She's been reaching out to people in 3 countries. Her tone, based on the traffic metadata, not content. We don't have content yet. Suggests she's in the process of activating something. A contingency. The endgame directive, Sarah said. Possibly, Okafor said, or her personal version of it. Ashworth has been part of this network for 4 years. She's watched 8 cities' worth of operations get shut down. If she has a contingency plan, she built it years ago and she's been maintaining it. She paused. What worries me is not that she'll run. She's been here for a month. I don't think her plan is running. What worries me is evidence destruction. If she has documents or communications in that Belgravia office that are not covered by our current warrant, and we don't yet know the full scope of what's there, a few hours could cost us significantly. How long for the warrant to expand? I said, we're seeking it now. My best estimate is 6 to 8 hours. She looked at me steadily. I want to be transparent with you, Murray, because Torres has been transparent with me about who you are and how you work. The arrest warrant I have is sufficient to take her into custody. The extended warrant, For the full contents of the office, the servers, the physical records, takes more time. If she destroys material in that window, we lose it. I looked at Sarah. She was already looking at me. What would you need from us? She said to Okafor. Okafor was quiet for a moment. The Thames moved gray and patient outside the window. I need nothing from you that requires you to enter a building you have no legal authority to enter, she said carefully. What I can tell you is that the Belgravia address is 14 Chesham Place. It's a 5-minute walk from Sloane Square Station. The office occupies the first floor. The building has a residential address and a commercial tenant registration. She paused. I am telling you this because I believe in full information sharing with allied investigators who have earned my respect, not because I am asking you to do anything with it. She stood up. I need to go accelerate a warrant application. Be reachable. She walked out. Sarah picked up her coat. She just told us we're not to go, I said. She told us everything we needed to know to be useful, Sarah said, and maintained complete deniability about what she expected us to do with it. She was already moving toward the door. Sloane Square is 4 stops on the district line. 14. Chesham Place was a cream-painted Georgian terrace in the heart of Belgravia, the kind of address that had been worth approximately nothing for most of its history, and was now worth approximately everything, because of its proximity to everything else worth approximately everything. It sat on a quiet residential street of identical buildings, embassy cars parked at intervals, a few dog walkers moving at the unhurried pace of people in expensive postcode areas, the particular hush of a neighborhood that had long ago finished being impressed by itself. We came along Chesham Place from the Eaton Square end, walking at the pace of tourists with nowhere to be and nothing to prove. The first floor lights of number 14 were on. Movement, Sarah said quietly. She had better sight lines than me from our angle on the pavement. Someone inside, near the window. My phone vibrated. Miles. Tell me you're not in Belgravia, he said. I'm not in Belgravia. I said. A pause. You're definitely in Belgravia. What's happening on the traffic? I said. The communication pattern changed 15 minutes ago. Miles said, and his voice had a particular focused urgency he got when something was happening that needed to be communicated faster than he could organize it. She sent 3 encrypted messages in rapid succession to 2 contacts, one of whom is in Vienna, one in Dubai. The pattern is consistent with instructions. Not contingency planning anymore. Execution. She's activating something. I said, she's activating something right now. Miles confirmed. Frank, whatever she's destroying or moving, she's doing it in the next hour. I looked at the first floor windows of 14 Chesham Place. We didn't have arrest authority. We didn't have a warrant. We were 2 American private investigators on a residential street in Belgravia with no legal basis for entering any building in the United Kingdom. These were the facts as they existed. They were not, however, facts that changed what was happening behind those first floor windows. Miles, I said, call Torres. Tell him the timeline has moved. Tell him Okafor needs to accelerate the warrant and the arrest team. Already calling. Miles said, Frank. I know, I said. I hung up. We can't go in, Sarah said. She wasn't arguing. She was stating. No, I said. We can ring the doorbell, she said. I looked at her. We are investigators who have been working the Chrysalis case for 8 months, she said. We have identified Diana Ashworth as a key figure in that network. We have traveled to London as part of an international investigation coordinated with NCA and multiple law enforcement agencies across 7 jurisdictions. We have every professional reason to knock on the door of a known subject and ask to speak with her. She paused. We cannot compel her to open the door. We cannot enter without her consent. But if she opens the door and consents to speak with us, we are not violating anything. And if she's in the process of destroying evidence while we're on the doorstep, I said, that's a harder problem. One thing at a time, Sarah said. We walked to the door of number 14. The woman who answered was not Diana Ashworth. She was younger, mid-20s, professionally dressed, the composed alertness of a personal assistant who had been trained to manage unexpected arrivals with neither hostility nor accommodation. She looked at us with the polite assessment of someone doing a rapid calculation. "Can I help you?" she said. "Frank Murray," I said. "This is my partner, Sarah Murray. We're investigators with a professional interest in speaking with Diana Ashworth. It's time-sensitive." She didn't react to the name, which was itself a data point. "I'm afraid Ms. Ashworth is not available today," she said. "If you'd like to leave your details." "Is she in the building?" I said. A pause that was a fraction too long. "Ms. Ashworth is—" From behind her, through a hallway, I could see the foot of a staircase and the edge of a door that was not quite fully closed, came a particular sound of a shredder. The same percussion I'd heard in the basement corridor of the Bhattacharya Institute in New Delhi. I stepped back from the door. Sarah was already on her phone. "Okafor," Sarah said into the phone, with the precise economy of someone transmitting exactly the necessary information. "Active evidence destruction. 14 Chesham Place, first floor. You need to move now." The assistant was watching us. Her composure had not broken, but it had rearranged itself. "I'm going to ask you one more time," I said, keeping my voice level and my position on the public pavement outside the threshold. "Is Diana Ashworth in this building?" From upstairs, the shredder sound stopped. Footsteps on a staircase, and then Diana Ashworth appeared at the top of the stairs. She was exactly as described, 53 years old, poised, professionally dressed, with the groomed composure of a person who has spent 2 decades in rooms where composure was both currency and armor. Silver-streaked hair, the bearing of a woman who did not react visibly to surprises, because she had long since decided that visible reactions were a form of information she wasn't obligated to give away. She came down the stairs and looked at us through the open door with the specific expression of someone deciding, in real time, how to play the next 3 minutes. "Mr. Murray," she said, not surprised, informed, "and Mrs. Murray. I've been wondering when you'd appear." "Here we are," I said. She studied me for a moment. "You have no authority here. You know that." "I do," I said, "which is why I'm standing on the pavement, and not in your hallway. The people with authority in the United Kingdom are on their way." Something moved behind her eyes. Not fear exactly. Something more considered than fear. The expression of a chess player recognizing that a sequence she'd planned several moves out has reached a square she hadn't fully anticipated. "How long do you have?" Sarah said, not hostile, conversational. Ashworth looked at Sarah. A different assessment than the one she'd given me. "For what?" she said. "For whatever you were doing upstairs." Sarah said, "We heard the shredder. Whatever you've run through it in the last 40 minutes, that's gone. But there's more up there. We both know that. And in the time between right now and when Okafor's team arrives, you have a choice to make about what the next 3 years look like." Ashworth was quiet. "We've spoken with Kurt Allenbach," I said, "with Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, with Dr. Nandita Mehta, with the operational lead from Singapore who's been in custody for 2 months talking to 3 different jurisdictions." I paused. Nobody who cooperated early has done worse than the ones who waited. That wasn't entirely true as a legal principle, and I knew it. But it was true as a pattern of outcomes across every facility we closed. Ashworth looked at the street behind us, at the quiet Belgravia afternoon, at the dog walkers and the embassy cars, and the particular composed beauty of a neighborhood that had no interest in the conversation happening at the door of number 14. "I would like to speak with my solicitor," she said. "That's your right," Sarah said, "and you'll have that opportunity very shortly." Ashworth looked at me. "You've been following this man for 8 months. Longer," I said. "The L.A. work started before that. And when he's convicted," she said, "what then?" "Home," I said. "Eventually." She almost smiled, the specific, compressed expression of someone who had spent 22 years making things happen invisibly and was now, for the first time, being seen clearly. Okafor's team arrived 9 minutes later. 3 NCA vehicles, 8 officers. Okafor herself, in the first car, already out the door before the vehicle had fully stopped with the focused momentum of someone who had been moving toward this arrest for 2 years. She looked at us on the pavement outside number 14, a look that contained a lot of things, approval and controlled exasperation in approximately equal measure. "You rang the doorbell," she said. "We were in the neighborhood." Sarah said, Okafor allowed herself precisely 1 second of expression that was not entirely professional. Then, I will need full statements from both of you regarding everything that was said and observed from the public pavement. Every word. Of course, I said, and you will wait here while my team executes the arrest and secures the premises. Understood, Sarah said. Okafor went inside. Her team followed. The door of number 14 closed behind them. Sarah and I stood on the pavement in the cold December afternoon. A light rain had started. The thin, committed London drizzle that doesn't vary in intensity, but simply continues, the way some problems do, until it's simply part of the landscape. You know what's happening inside, Sarah said. Yes, I said. And we're out here, she said. We're out here, I agreed. She was quiet for a moment. The drizzle continued. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm went off briefly and then stopped. This is probably what it's supposed to feel like, she said. The right people doing their jobs without us in the way. I said, yes, she said. The network we built, Tokyo to Singapore to Zurich to here. It works without us in every room. Torres said that in New Delhi. He did, I said. The drizzle intensified almost imperceptibly. We stood in it. It was not the worst thing that had happened to us in 8 months, and it was considerably more comfortable than most of it. Okafor came out at 4:30 p.m. She walked to where we were standing. We'd found a doorway 2 buildings down that provided some protection from the rain, and she stood with us for a moment, looking at the street. Ashworth is in custody, she said. The office is secured. My digital forensics team is beginning inventory. She paused. The shredder had been used. Approximately 40 minutes of material, by the team's estimate, based on the debris volume. We won't know what's gone until we know what's there. But what's there is substantial. She looked at me. A physical records room in the back of the first floor. 13 years of client files. Filing cabinets, not digital. She was meticulous about keeping operational records off network systems. My team is characterizing it as the most comprehensive physical documentation of a covert executive placement operation they have encountered. She kept everything, Sarah said. She kept everything she believed was protected by the structure of the work. Okafor said, the legitimate placement records, the contracts, the correspondence. What she shredded, I believe, was a secondary layer, the communications that referenced specific operational details. But the primary records, which placement went where, when, paid at what rate, through which vehicle, that's all there. And with Allenbach's financial architecture laid alongside it, the picture is complete. She paused. The placement fees that Ashworth received for 12 specific placements across the Chrysalis facilities average for times or market rate for comparable work. Someone was paying a significant premium for specific expertise. That expertise is now documented. 4 times market rate, for 12 placements. 13 years of carefully maintained records that she kept because she believed they were clean enough to survive scrutiny. She'd been right about that. Once. Before we had Allenbach's accounts. Has she said anything? I said, she asked for her solicitor immediately and has not spoken since. Okafor said, which is her right. But before the solicitor arrived, she made one voluntary statement. She paused. She said, tell the Mai's they were more thorough than I expected. Sarah looked at me. She's been watching us. I said, she's been watching the network unravel for 8 months. Okafor said, so was the beginning. Each subsequent closure told her more about what you were doing and how you were doing it. She's not unintelligent. She understood the picture. She paused. She chose to stay. That will be relevant to the prosecution. Why did she stay? Sarah said, Okafor considered this. My experience of people in her position, people who have built something over many years and have come to identify with it, is that leaving it feels like destruction rather than survival. She'd spent 22 years building the consultancy, for years integrating it into Pemberton's network. The network was what made it matter in the way she understood matching. She paused. Leaving would have meant acknowledging that the network was something to run from. She wasn't ready to do that. I thought about that, about the specific human tendency to stay in the thing you've built past the point where staying makes sense, because the alternative is admitting what you built it for. Okafor, I said, The contacts she reached out to this morning, Vienna and Dubai. Miles's monitoring data is already in the hands of the relevant authorities in both cities. Okafor said, the Vienna contact is being assessed by Austrian federal police. The Dubai contact is a more complex jurisdictional question, but Torres's office is working it. She looked at me. You're not finished. No, I said, not quite. But you're closer than you've ever been, she said. Yes, I said, we are. She looked at the door of number 14 for a moment, then back at us. Good work, Murray. Both of you. Torres told me you were worth trusting. He was right. She walked back toward the building. Sarah and I stood in the doorway and watched her go. Miles called at 6 p.m. from Culver City, which was 10 a.m. his time, which meant he'd been at the monitor since the small hours California time, and was currently running on a particular combination of caffeine and momentum that characterized Miles at his most productive and least stable. Okay, he said. Okay, so Ashworth's in custody. Ashworth's in custody. I confirmed. The NCA has the physical records. All of them. A pause with a quality I didn't hear from Miles often. Something that wasn't processing or planning. Frank, that's the placement network. That's the operational infrastructure. Pemberton in Korean custody. Allenbach cooperating in Switzerland. Ashworth arrested in London. The three layers. The strategic, the financial, the operational. All three. All three? I said. Another pause. I've been doing this for 8 months, Frank. I've been doing a lot of things for 8 months. The cellular monitoring and the server forensics and the beneficial ownership reconstruction and you know what I've been doing. And I know what you and Sarah have been doing. And I know it's not over and the Los Angeles trial hasn't happened and there are still threads. He paused. But the thing he built, the thing he believed couldn't be dismantled because it was distributed and redundant and built to survive. It's dismantled. Yes, I said. Miles, it is. A pause that had something human and complicated in it. The expression, in Miles's form, of a person who had worked very hard towards something and was standing at the moment when the work was done. Okay, he said. Okay, good. Then, recovering his register, the Vienna contact. I've been building the picture on her for 48 hours, based on the traffic analysis and the corporate cross-references. I think she may be the most significant person in the network after Pemberton himself. I'm talking someone who had full knowledge of every facility, every protocol, every financial structure, not just the London operational layer, the strategic layer, the thing Pemberton kept closest to himself. A name, I said. I have a partial ID and a hotel address in Vienna's first district. Miles said, I'm working on the full picture. Give me 12 hours. Vienna, I said. Sarah was watching me from across the hotel room, already reading my expression. Vienna, Miles said, I know. One more. Detective knocked over the takeout delivery again this morning. Mrs. Chun has issued a formal written complaint in 2 languages. Tell her I'll be home soon, I said. She started leaving your mail in a separate pile with a sticky note that says, when Frank returns. Miles said, it's a reasonably large pile. How's detective? I said, fine. He knocked over the egg roll delivery and then fell asleep on your desk chair like nothing happened. He's living his best life. Frank, after Vienna. You're really coming home. After Vienna. I said, okay, Miles said, okay, I'll have everything ready. Vienna full profile incoming. He hung up. Sarah was still watching me. The Thames was barely visible from our Pimlico window, a dark ribbon of water in the winter evening, the lights of the embankment just visible through the glass. Vienna, she said. One more, I said. Miles says she's the most significant person in the network after Pemberton himself. Full strategic knowledge. Sarah was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of reluctance, the quiet of someone integrating information and arriving at the same place I'd already arrived. If we get her, she said, we have everything. Everything Pemberton's lawyers can't argue around. I said, a witness who knows the complete picture, who can corroborate everything from the strategic level down. I looked at her. We get her, we come home. That's it. That's the end. She picked up her coffee, which had gone cold again, a recurring feature of our working life across 8 months in 7 cities that had never quite resolved itself. Torres is going to say something about Vienna. Torres is going to call us in approximately 40 minutes, I said. And he's going to say that Austria is a sovereign nation with its own law enforcement, and that we should maintain appropriate collaborative posture. And what are we going to say? She asked. We're going to say we understand completely, I said, and then we're going to Vienna. She almost smiled, the one that wasn't quite a smile, but was something better. Torres called at 7:15 p.m. London, he said. London, I confirmed. Ashworth is in NCA custody. The Belgravia office is secured, and the physical records are being inventoried. Okafor's team characterizes the contents as comprehensive. A pause of the quality of Torres receiving information he had hoped for, but hadn't allowed himself to bank on. What was lost in the shredding, he said. We don't know yet. 40 minutes of material. Okafor believes it was a secondary communications layer, direct operational correspondence. But the primary records are intact. The placement records were the fee anomalies, Torres said. He was already running the prosecution implications. Yes, 12 placements at 4 times market rate, documented across 13 years of client files that Ashworth maintained in physical form. I paused. She kept it all because she thought the structure protected her. The structure she believed protected her was Allenbach's architecture, Torres said, which is now the prosecution's architecture. Another pause. Frank. 3 layers. Strategic, financial, operational. Sold to London, 8 months. I need you to understand. He stopped. Started again. You and Sarah have built something that I have not seen built in 20 years in this job. The breadth of the cooperative network, the documentation, the witness cooperation across 7 jurisdictions. It doesn't happen the way this happened. Not from the outside. Not without institutional authority. He paused. I want that on record. Torres, I said. I know, he said. Vienna. I waited. The Vienna contact, Torres said. Austrian Federal Police, the BVT, have been notified to the standard mutual assistance channels. They are aware there may be a significant Chrysalis-adjacent subject in their jurisdiction. They are cooperative. Miles's preliminary identification suggests the individual may be operating under a secondary identity. If that's accurate, the Austrian authorities will need someone who knows the full context of the network to make the identification useful, which was Torres's way of saying, go to Vienna. Without saying, go to Vienna. We'll be in contact, I said. Frank, 16 years. 16 years, I said. For what it's worth, which I know you'll tell me isn't very much because you don't put much stock in what people say before the verdict. He paused. I put stock in it. What you and Sarah have done matters. Whatever the verdict. That was the most Torres had ever said to me in a phone call that wasn't about operational specifics. Thank you, Torres, I said. Good luck in Vienna, he said, as if that were simply the next reasonable thing to say and not a departure from 2 decades of careful language management. He hung up. We ate dinner near the river, a place on the embankment that Sarah had looked up in the taxi from Chesham Place, which had a window table and a view of the water and food that was not vending machine food or airplane food or the rushed half meal of people who were trying to accomplish something else at the same time. Outside, the Thames moved in the dark. The south bank lights across the water. The Lambeth Bridge just visible upstream, lit in its characteristic pale green. 8 months, Sarah said. 8 months, I said. Sold to London. She turned her glass. Do you remember what it felt like, Seoul? The first day, the plane descending through clouds over the Han River. We had a wire transfer and a hunch and Miles pulling threads on a company he'd never heard of, I said. And now we have 3 layers of Pemberton's network in custody across 3 continents and 135 people who are alive and not in a sublevel somewhere waiting to be told what was done to them. She was quiet for a moment, and we're going to Vienna. We're going to Vienna. I confirmed. And then, she said, and then the finale, I said, back where it started, Los Angeles. Mrs. Chen's egg rolls. Detective sleeping on the desk chair. The part where Pemberton actually goes to trial, and we have to sit in a courtroom instead of an international terminal and watch it happen in front of the jury. That sounds slow, she said. The slow part is the right part, I said. The slow part is where it becomes real. Courts and transcripts and cross-examination, and all the things that are frustrating precisely because they matter, the parts that turn what we build into something permanent. She was quiet, looking at the river. Ravi, she said, from New Delhi, the young man whose mother needed surgery. Yes, I said. Sunita, the woman who believed what the consent form said. Yes. The 17 people in the Yokohama Medical Center, the 4 in Seoul. Emma Reeves from Catalina. She looked at me. The slow part is for them. Yes, I said. It is. We ate dinner by the Thames in the December dark. The city moved around us, doing what cities do in the evenings, eating and talking, and moving toward whatever the next thing was with the cheerful indifference of populations that have no way of knowing what was done today inside their geography and wouldn't recognize if they did. That was all right. That was how it was supposed to work. You did the work, so the city didn't have to know about it. So the people inside it could go on eating dinner by the river without having to carry the weight of what was underneath. We were booked on an early flight to Vienna. Before we went to the airport, I walked to the embankment. 5 a.m., London still dark and cold, and the drizzle unchanged from the afternoon, as if it had simply decided that December rainfall was a commitment rather than a weather event. The Thames was very wide and very black, and moved with the patient indifference of water that has been moving to the same geography for longer than the city built beside it. South Bank across the water, lights on in a few windows. A river bus running the early route, navigation lights green and red in the dark. I thought about what Okafor had said about Ashworth, about the specific human tendency to stay inside the thing you built, past the point where staying makes sense, because leaving means admitting what you built it for. I thought about Pemberton in Korean custody, about the lawyers filing motions against frozen accounts, about the particular quality of a man who had spent years building something he believed in and was now watching it systematically dismantled, city by city, layer by layer. I didn't feel sorry for him. I want to be clear about that because I've spent 8 months in this case, and it would be a kind of sentimentality, the wrong kind, to arrive at this point and find something like sympathy for a man who paid for research protocols on people who never agreed to be subjects. The 135 people we'd found. The ones we hadn't found yet. The ones who were living now with neurological consequences they hadn't asked for. Try to build a normal life on the other side of what had been done to them. No, not sorry. What I felt, standing beside the Thames in the dark, was something that didn't have a clean name. The particular exhaustion of having spent a long time running towards something and being close enough now to see the finish line clearly, and having Vienna between you and it, and knowing that Vienna was the last thing and the thing that would make everything else stick. And under that quieter, something that might have been the first early signal of the thing that comes after, the stillness on the other side of motion, the particular quality of a life that has been organized around pursuit and is about to have to reorganize itself around something else. Portugal, after Vienna, after Los Angeles, after the verdict, pastiest and nada and cobblestone hills, and no one shooting at us. I stood by the Thames until it was time to go to the airport. Then I went. The flight to Vienna left at 7 a.m. Sarah slept. I read Miles's 12-hour update, which had arrived at 4 a.m. London time, and which ran to 19 additional pages. The Vienna contact had a name now. Eleanor Voss, 61 years old, American-born, UK-educated, Austrian resident for the past 11 years. A career in international pharmaceutical consulting that had taken her from New York to London to Geneva to Vienna with the smooth, continuous mobility of someone whose expertise was always in demand and whose location was always a deliberate choice rather than an accident. She was not Pemberton's financial architect. That had been Allenbach. She was not his operational placement network. That had been Ashworth. She was something else. Something Miles had been chasing since the first fragments had appeared in the Meridian Helvetica server data. She was the person who had designed Project Chrysalis, not the research protocols themselves. Those had been developed by facility scientists under direction, but the architecture, the structure, the reason the network was distributed the way it was, built to survive the loss of individual nodes, designed to operate in jurisdictions where oversight was limited and consent frameworks were exploitable. The intellectual framework that had turned Pemberton's financial resources and his appetite for impunity into a functional global operation. She had been, Miles believed, his first and most important partner. Not coerced, not debt-trapped, a true believer, the kind that Miles had flagged as different from the others, the kind that had looked at what they were building and found it not criminal but visionary. She had been in Vienna for 11 years. She had been in Vienna throughout Seoul and Tokyo and Singapore and Bangkok and Manila and New Delhi and Zurich and London. She had been waiting, Miles believed, to see how it ended. That was who we were flying to find. I read the file at 30,000 feet above the channel and thought about true believers, about the specific quality of a person who looks at something the rest of the world calls monstrous and sees only the future they intend to build. They were the hardest ones, not because they were more dangerous than the Allenbachs and the Ashworth of the network. They usually weren't in the immediate physical sense, but because they didn't break the way the trapped ones broke. They didn't have 11 months of insurance records waiting to be handed over. They didn't have placement files that told the whole story. They had conviction, and conviction was the last thing that locked the door rather than opening it. Vienna, one more city, one more door. I was going to walk through it. 16 years in this business, and the one thing I've learned is that the truth doesn't find people. People find the truth, but only if someone keeps looking. If these cases matter to you the way they matter to me, hit that like button. Subscribe, ring the bell, because the next case is already out there, waiting to be solved. Vienna is the last door. Eleanor Voss designed all of this, and we are coming to find her. I'm Frank Murray. I don't quit. Neither should you.